Hello, this is Jennifer Petersen, and welcome to the Tea Pods podcast. This is the show for tea enthusiasts. It's all about tea education, tea travel, and tea business. It's time to get started. Let's welcome today's guest. She believes in the power of food and hospitality to improve lives and create friendship circles, and she excels at that, by the way. She's a tea entrepreneur, fantabulous professional cook, tea entrepreneur, and vintage dealer. She has over 10 years of retail experience, including restaurant management experience. She makes specialty tea blends, and her friends and customers look forward to her hospitality. With the encouragement and support of her husband, children, and friends, she remodeled a 1917 craftsman house that became a destination tea business. She's in the process of building and expanding a new location that will showcase her tea baking skills and beautiful flower and herb gardens. Her enthusiasm is boundless. She shares her tea room experience and hospitality with everyone who comes in contact with her. Our special guest today is Melanie Holsti. Welcome, Melanie. We call you Mel. And I have up on the screen a picture of Steep the Senses. What is Steep the Senses all about?
So Steep the Senses was the first incarnation of my tea business. In the fall of 2007, I had one small child and another one on the way. And I was married to a cattle rancher. And by the way, there is no such thing as a rich cattle rancher, at least not one that got rich raising cattle. And so my family, as far from town as we lived, having an outside job just was not going to work between the distance to town, the condition of the roads, and the climate that we lived in. So I started brainstorming ways to bring in some additional income, recognizing that my primary job for the time being was going to be taking care of my two very small children. I knew I didn't want to become part of an MLM company, and I needed to find something that I could believe in, that I wouldn't lose interest in a couple of years, and that I would be able to grow once my children were old enough to not need my constant attention. The only thing that seemed to fit all those criteria was tea, and that's how Steep the Senses came to be. I started out just purchasing wholesale tea and repackaging it under my own label, and due to state laws about food handling and so forth, I had to limit my sales to craft shows and farmers markets. And that's primarily what I did until we purchased the house that would become the tea room in the fall of 2017. The most successful and frankly the most fun market that we did was the Baker Creek Spring Planting Festival in Mansfield, Missouri. That gave us a lot of opportunities to talk one-on-one with people, to sample teas, to sell loose leaf tea, and just kind of network and get our name out in the area. We sold iced tea, tea accessories, samples, and then bags of loose teas. And we had fun figuring out, and this is an important thing, not what is it, but what could it be. For example, the way that we displayed our loose teas, we used a couple of rickety wooden step ladders, and my husband built divided trays that would slide into the rungs, and you could shop both sides of it and shop the different teas that we had bagged ready for sale. We sold, and because we didn't have enough merchandise to fill a whole 10 by 10 tent the first couple of years, we also sold some cedar vegetable baskets, seed starting trays, organizers that my husband built out of pieces of old cedar fence, and we branded it with our farm logo. And so we kind of had something that would appeal to both men and women going on in the tents there.
Well, I think the variety also attracts a wider variety of people if they spot like something they're interested in. So having a mixture in your booth probably drew more people in too, and then they look at the tea. I think you've got a broader appeal that way. And I'm going to point out your ladders here because I think that is a very clever design. That would work well in trade show booths as well, not just at a farmer's market or something.
Yes, they were pretty. Every rack had to go in a specific place on a specific ladder, but it was very quick to fold it up and stack it in. We had a van, it's a big old commercial van that we could move everything around in, and it all fit in there.
Now, what did you use? What are the trays on the table?
The ones for sampling teas were old bakery bread loaf pans where they baked several loaves in one pan.
Oh, I see. Okay, here. How about this one with the little containers? What is this?
I can't see the picture that you're referencing.
Okay, I am so sorry. On the in the photo left of the baking pans looks like vials.
So I had little spice jars that we took. I think we left the spice shaker part on, and we put just samples of the different teas so that people could see what it looked like, loose leaf, and they could open the lid and smell what the tea smelled like. Because displaying the teas for sale in a clear bag would degrade the quality of the tea. This allowed people to see what they were getting and to check out things that maybe they wouldn't take a chance on if they hadn't at least smelled it and looked at it already. And we had it, these were cute little galvanized racks that we picked up at Walmart in their summer, outdoor section where they'd have sun tea jars and just a whole collection of farmhouse looking display and serving pieces.
That it's an excellent tutorial on how to set up a booth, by the way. And then so you have a little like a notebook there where people signing up for your mailing list, or what is that? What
mailing
that is?
List at the time, yes.
Okay, that's great. All right, and then what did you do?
Then in September of 2017, and frankly, we spent the better part of a year looking for a space. We purchased a 100-year-old craftsman house that needed a lot of work, and we immediately began renovating it. The very first thing that we did was cut down those smelly, scraggly cedar trees that completely covered the front of the house. We redid the roof. The front porch had been open originally, and then had enclosed it with aluminum storm windows that were attached to nothing. You could take hold of one window and you could shake the whole wall of windows. It was just falling apart, and the floor was rotten. So we tore all of that out and we made it an open porch again. We poured a concrete floor in it, and we poured a concrete ramp to replace the front sidewalk and steps so that people with limited mobility and wheelchairs, on crutches, whatever, would be able to easily get up from the street into the building.
Okay, before we work our way up to the transformation and the final view of it, let's talk a little bit about the interior. All right, we are looking at a photo of green trim and an old kitchen. What did you do in here?
We pretty much gutted that kitchen. We took it down to the lath. We had to tear out all the plaster. Most of it was cracked and covered up with paneling anyway. We covered over a doorway because the way the house was originally laid out, you could have roller skated around in circles and never hit a wall. And there were just too many entrances to the kitchen. It made it just really inconvenient to try to come up with a layout that would allow us to serve people. And we needed to enlarge the bathroom at the same time in order to make it accessible. So we covered up the door, and we just rearranged everything. All the cabinets came out. We discovered a pantry had been covered over with paneling at some point, which is where we moved our double oven, fit nicely into that space. The flooring, the hardwood was still there, but it was covered over with some kind of vinyl plank. We took that out, and we left the hardwood in place, but we just covered it with a sheet vinyl that looked like wood that would take the wear and tear and would be cleanable by health department standards.
Well, the change, I'm looking at the kitchen now, and the change is just remarkable. I mean, you've got your ice maker here. It looks like your sandwich table, refrigerator. It's not even the same place.
It was so much brighter in there. And we did most of our renovations with an eye toward, if at some point this needs to turn back into a house, we don't want somebody to have to renovate it to turn it back into a house, because that would decrease its resale value.
Mm-hmm.
And so we tried to keep sort of a farmhouse look appropriate to how old the house was going on in the kitchen, while still having washable walls and washable floors.
Well, it's certainly a change. Wow, from how it started out. And we're looking now at a little shard of porcelain. What does that tell us?
Well, we were digging post holes in the backyard to put privacy fence because we had a lot of people cutting through the yard and people walking their dogs in the backyard, and we just needed to put a stop to that. So we were putting up some privacy fence, and one of the post holes that we dug, my husband dug up this little pottery shard and it said ironstone on there. And I've been toying with the idea of using ironstone in the name because it's beautiful dishes. And that was just sort of our confirmation that that was the name it should have.
Well, you worked in the backyard as well. In the backyard, you had garden seating. I'm not quite sure how you managed to do that, but it's absolutely beautiful with the tiered tray and the table setting.
We used patio pavers. Where that setting is at is actually under the biggest, sturdiest redbud tree that I've ever seen. Most of them are just little spindly things, but this one, I suppose, because it had been in a yard in town, was very large and massive, and it almost looked like those trees that people prune, the little tiny ones. I'm drawing a blank on the word that I want.
Yes, those.
Yes. Anyway, it had that sort of a look to it, and so we just leveled up the ground underneath and just put some brick patio pavers under there so that we wouldn't have to be mowing underneath the table all the time. And we set up two patio pads like that in the backyard.
Very nice. Very nice. Especially on like a hot summer day, you want to go outside. That's absolutely beautiful. Well, the transformation was remarkable. When you first drive, this doesn't even look like the same place. So with this completed exterior, tell us about, now we talked about it in the very beginning, but tell us about what you did.
Well, once we had repaved the porch, and we did that so that we would have a place for covered outdoor seating, because you always want to be able to expand seating for times of year when you've got more guests than your average. We put in a little white picket fence with an arbor, and our goal was to just make there be a transition from the real world into tea land. And so we had perennial flowers, cottage flowers and shrubs, blooming trees planted all outside. And then we painted the front of the tea room an inviting, welcoming color, a serene color, because we want people to come and relax and spend time, and then spend some time in the gift shop when they're done eating. And so we worked really hard to make every aspect of the tea room a welcoming embrace once you crossed the threshold.
Well, I'm looking at all your flowers here. Were they there in the beginning, or you put those in, like the iris?
We put everything in the beginning. The only thing that was native growing was some ivy, which I spent a lot of time trying to eradicate.
Yes. Because
it's hard on stucco. Daylilies, which this is just a personal thing. I just absolutely despise daylilies. And then there were some walnut trees that were too close to the house, and they were a problem and they had to go. And of course the cedar trees. But pretty much anything floral, we put all of that in.
And you had lanterns?
Yes. On the front porch in the spring and the summer months, we had hanging baskets of pansies because I am a pansy addict and they're my favorite. And so it was pansies. And then in the fall and the winter, where it would have been carrying stuff in and out all the time, we switched that over to some lanterns that looked like candles, and they were solar powered. So we didn't have an extra power bill, and it was just in the evenings when we were closed, it was still an attractive place to drive by.
Well, it's amazing what you did like that. I mean, from the first photo that we had, I should have inserted that again, just to remind people what the cottage looked like before you started working on it. Also I'm looking at the front of it. You have plenty of space for signage, like the big sign for tea room, and then the Ironstone Cottage, name, which would be visible from a distance. How did you make something like that?
The round sign was actually a plywood folding tabletop that we found at the Restore, and that thing was really heavy, but it was exactly the size that I needed. We didn't have to cut anything out. We just had to take the metal legs off. And then I bought letters at Hobby Lobby, half price, of course, and spray painted them black So, and the goal was for the lettering to look like the type of font and lettering that you would see on as the hallmark on ironstone dishes. And it just fit. And my husband and his friend darn near killed themselves getting that sign hung up there. But the house was built out of rough sawn oak, so it could support the weight once we got it up there. And then the sign that says tea room, we bought some, these are almost a foot tall. They're gold resin letters, also from Hobby Lobby, that spelled out tea room. And then the little teapots are just metal cutouts that I ordered from an eBay seller, spray painted them white and put them up there. And I keep that sign. It will be going in my future home kitchen, I think, at some point.
Well, and then did you also have like bird feeders or fountains or something outside?
We had bird baths outside, and so they were kind of an architectural feature for some of the flower beds. And then we put an arbor on the front picket fence, and we put one around the window that the Ironstone Cottage sign is hanging above. And then there was one in the back, and we had David Austin roses all over the arbors and along the fence.
You know, I'm real big in any classes or any topics that we talk about, not only about a tea room, but an interior or anything just in general, the sensory perceptions. And so when you think about your senses, you've got your visual, you've got sound, you've got, all five senses, and everything about this has appeals to the senses. And not just in the beginning, I'm not referring back to like the steep the senses, but in just looking at this, you've got the calming color and the visual, the flowers. You would have the sound of the bird baths. You would have the fragrance of the flowers. Everything about this is inviting. It's really appeals to all five senses. It truly does. And then, well, any final comments on what you do over about your startup process?
Honestly, the biggest thing that I would have done differently if I had to go back and do it again, I would have set up a countdown to opening day planner so that things like setting a date for a grand opening would not have fallen through the cracks. I also would have hired a bookkeeper right off the bat to keep track of all the receipts and billing for us. My husband and I we are very different in the talent departments, but one thing that we both absolutely hate is doing back book work. So we avoid it as long as we can. And honestly, that sort of data entry is much better done right away rather than when you absolutely have to do it in order to get your taxes done.
Thank you, Mel. This is such a boost to those people who want to open a tea room and aren't sure about what they do with the cottage makeover. You had good ideas and put a lot of love and labor into making yours a beautiful tea experience. It's truly a remarkable place in tea land. We have other podcasts about the Ironstone Cottage that focus on interior layout and guest experience. I hope our listeners find pleasure and inspiration in your ideas. Thank you to our guest for sharing time with us today. And thank you for tuning in. Linger longer with us. If you enjoyed today's show, head over to teatrademark.com to subscribe to our newsletter, catch our next episode, and follow us on social media. This is Jennifer Petersen with Tea Trademark, reminding you that Tealand is a happy place.